One of the common mistakes people make in palmistry is confusing an overlap with a break. Here we see an overlapping heart line here. There's a big difference between an overlap and a break. One could be emotional upheaval, whereas the other could be a heart operation. There's a big difference. So this is the first thing that I want to talk about in this palm. Now, just above this cradling heart line here, which is hugely significant, and actually just look at how deep these heart lines are in the palm. They are hugely impactful to the hand's owner. And the second thing, just above this heart line here, notice this fragmented and thin fraying girdle of Venus here. That's the second thing I want to talk about, which also coincides with potentially this other little mention up here. So I'm making this also my number 2, and that is the joint in the first knuckles of the fingers, and just how they're ever so slightly protruding there. They're sort of bulbous, that first knuckle joint. The second thing here, just to remind myself there, is the fate line. Now look closely, and just before the, I think it's 28, could be a little bit, actually could be 30. So around this age, look at the little box. There's a box here at the end of the fate line, and there's another line coming from the lifeline. There's an environmental factor here that's prevented the person's destiny from continuing the same path. So we'll talk about what that means at number 3. And the fourth thing here, look up here on the Mount of Jupiter, and there's a curious, I can't quite figure this out here, but look at the kind of the chaining, the barbs here, where the life and the headline begin. This is not a smooth sailing start for this person. And you can see that connected to early life is this sort of element of protection that joins on to the heart line. And there's, if you look very closely, it's not the clearest of images, but there's a box within a box. So that's what I want to talk about in number 4. That's curious, and I've got my theories as to what that means. So there we have the left hand. And now just soak in what you're seeing here on the left hand and compare it with the right. Look how different this hand is to the right. Now, someone asked me this quite recently, actually. What does it mean when the left hand is so very different to the right? It can mean several things. One of the things it could mean is that they have 2 very different parents, but we don't see the starting points of these lines aren't all that different. I don't think that's what's going on here. The major differences that I notice here are the headline on the right hand is longer than on the left. So that's the 5th thing that I'll get around to explaining. What's the other thing? I mean, obviously you don't see an overlap in the heart line here. So you do see it on the left, but not on the right. Now that, I'm hoping that some of you will already have figured out what that means. The left hand shows us internally, introspectively, and the right is what's external. So the left is emotional, psychological, and what's inside our bodies. The right is what we show to others. It's more physical and practical and material. So what could it mean that there's not an overlap on the left, but there is on the right? I'll get around to explaining what that means. So that'll be my 6th point I'll cover, is the fact there's no overlap on the right hand. Now, the third thing when comparing left and right hand here, I want to point out, and you might have already spotted it, it's the fact there's 2 fate lines, not to be confused with a branch there, a forking headline, which is easily done. You don't see that on the left hand. There's only one fate line on the left hand, whereas on the right there are two. So that's my point number 7 that I'm going to get around to explaining. So just to recap, number 5 is the longer headline on the right hand. The fact there's no overlap in the heart line on the right hand, and that there are 2 fate lines on the right hand. So there's some big differences, big changes in this person's life, from what's going on the inside to the outside. So the first thing we're going to cover here is this overlapping heart line. Now, that's not a good example, is it? Neither is that. Not really sure I need to cover up this image with my blue lines for you to see what's going on here. I'll just describe. So you can see a couple of islands here in the heart line itself, just below Mercury and in between Apollo. And I feel like this is respiratory related, and that's what that's symbolizing. And the fact that this heart line is just so deep, indented, it's impactful. This heart line is a little bit confusing because it means one of 2 things for me. Firstly, this person is an emotional person to begin with, sensitive, knows their own feelings, and understands the feelings of others, empathetic, sympathetic, emotionally intelligent. I think I say that quite a lot in these readings. But their heart line is the strongest of the 3 major life, head, and heart lines. It's the strongest, it's the most impactful, it's the most meaningful. And being the left hand, being internal, this part of who they are, their emotions, but also physically, literally their heart, and in particular their lungs, is the most impactful organs, the most impactful area of the body for this person, for a reason. And this overlap, an overlap in a line, means a need to adapt to change. And in the left hand, you could say that an overlap in a heart line is due to a need to adapt emotionally. However, I'm thinking, being that this is so impactful, being that there are other signs here, the girdle of Venus and what I mentioned up here earlier, which I'm going to go around to explaining, I think that this is, yes, it's internal because it's the left hand. There's some adaptations that have needed to have occurred here, but I actually think this is physical. I think within this person's body there have been changes. I think this person was literally operated on. I think there is a significant operation that has potentially saved their life, but I also think that it has meant that they've had to adapt as well. And so that's what this overlap is. And it's interesting to me because the heart line starts off quite low down on the palm, which suggests someone who's a good listener, someone who's open and accepting to heartfelt stories. And then where the heart line begins again, almost, I mean, it's an overlap, so it's not quite that same thing, but it begins higher up. It's there's a need there to adapt, and it's as though this person now can no longer consider others, but in a more of a physical sense. I suppose it's hard to explain, but what I think this palm is trying to tell me is that this person no longer has the respiratory constitution they once had, perhaps. And they have to concern themselves more, they have to think about themselves more. Now, I could be completely wrong. It could be that actually, because there's no overlap on the right hand, the right is physical, it's material, practical. It could be that actually I'm completely wrong and this is something more emotional, internal. And that I'm completely wrong about my operation theory. However, there is still a bit of a bump here, and it looks to me, again, respiratory related. There's an island, there is some sort of overlap still here. I'm at a bit of a loss here. It's a difficult one, so I might have that completely wrong. So it'll be really interesting to get some feedback from this person. I hope I'm right. Generally speaking, I'm somewhere near correct. So the third thing that I wanted to mention, which is partly why and how I came to this conclusion about my operation theory, is this fragmented, whoops, I thought I was in draw mode. Is this fragmented and broken, scatty, and somewhat unsettling girdle of Venus. There's nothing wrong with the girdle of Venus. It's an extra heartline in a way. It's an extra complexity of emotions, and it can often mean that a person is it's just their emotions are sort of heightened. They feel more strongly about others and the world and themselves. They just feel more strongly than others, than the average person. And that's not a bad thing, but it is a bit of a mixed blessings, a bit of a double-edged sword, because a person who feels too much can often succumb to great heartache, which could, again, be the reason for this overlapping heartline. I suppose time will tell. But what this also could indicate, and it often does, and I've seen it many times in palms, this fragmentary girdle of Venus can often indicate atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat, or some sort of cardiac issue that's in some way needs operating or treating. And there are several signs for cardiac issues in the palm, and this is another one. It's not extreme in this person's palm, but you can see on the first joint of all of the fingers, not so much there, but here certainly, and just a tiny bit there, but then that's also this person's ability to persuade. You've got a slight indication there again that there are heart issues with this person. And this was why I kind of came to my conclusion about operation, about some sort of heart or lung operation in the first place, because of all these other signs I've already seen. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, this is my point number 3, is the square on this fate line here. Do we see it on the right hand? Well, the answer is not really. We don't see the same thing, at least. And if you look closely, yes, we've got these two fate lines. We'll get around to explaining that. But what we do see is an interference here from the life, some sort of circumstances that changes. Perhaps this person had to move away from their environment and stop their careers, or their career and their project or hobby or sideline business, whatever. Maybe they had 2 jobs. They're both very different. But what we do see is this coming up towards here. That's about the age of 35-ish. And it points towards where the heartline kind of overlaps on the right hand. I mean, there isn't an overlap on the right hand, just to be clear, but it is sort of hinting at it. And that's at 35. This is where it points towards this occurring. So it could be that if this person did have an operation, it was at 35. And what's interesting is the square here on the left hand is squares are protection. They're protective. They are a strong structure that box things in, keep things safe. And it occurs here for this person at the age of about the age of 30. And so if I'm correct, if this is an operation at 35, you could say that this person had to stop their career at the age of around 30 due to health issues and wasn't able to be operated on until the age of 35. So my fourth point that I wanted to make, are we on number 4? Yes, we are on number 4, is this square within a square on the Mount of Jupiter, and it's connected to quite an early point in this person's life. So I'm wondering if there has always been some heart issue that has been diagnosed, but then hasn't become a greater problem until later life, or there hasn't been a need to operate or an ability to operate for whatever reason, or perhaps the finances. I don't know exactly the situation or country this person lives in. But it's interesting to me to see this little box within a box, and that's what it kind of looks like. It's not the clearest of images, but on second glance here, I don't know if you can see, there's a kind of cross within this box. I don't know. I'm not sure what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments about this one. This is a particularly difficult marking for me to analyze. But I do think that, again, it all kind of coincides with, because it does join on to the heartline as well, with this operation, with the need. I think this person's been in and out of hospital since they were young, and I think that's what this is showing. And my theory is that this box here is, again, it's protective. And when we are operated on, the body represents, the palm shows this in a way that, okay, I'm being attacked here, but then also once we're all sewn up again and repaired, that it shows that we've been protected. So that could be what this is. This little crosses are strange symbols in palmistry. They are really some of the most enigmatic palmar markings, because on the one hand, so to speak, they're highly fortunate, and on the other they are accidents or signs of injury. And so it could be that this is seen as a sign of injury inflicted on the body, damage inflicted, but it's within a protected space. So it's literally someone's been opened up on the table. I don't know. I'm just kind of estimating, but I'm guesstimating. The fact that it's connected, it's all connected, is significant to me, because the lifeline is connected to the heartline. To me, that it makes it more of a physical thing. That's why I'm kind of drawing this conclusion about this operation. It's all these things combined has brought me to this original conclusion that I started off with about an operation on the lungs or the heart, or at least the torso area of the body. So now we're going to start comparing the left and the right hand a little bit. And the first comparison I wanted to reveal here, which is quite interesting, is the fact that the headline is longer on the right hand than the left. For me, I think this means that this person has made great changes in their life. And you can see on the right hand here, notice the dip in the headline, and where that changes. This person's been on a bit of a roller coaster. The headline curves down into this sort of a creative curve, and then trails off into a different direction, a direction of more planning and straightforward practical thinking, and less of one that's creative and imaginative and dreaming. It's one that's more forward thinking, one that's more thinking ahead and thinking to the future. So I think the practical conclusion, because we're looking at the right hand here, would be that this person has now entered a job role that requires them to think more in a sort of an administrative way. And on that note here, let's look at this, the tip of Saturn here. Notice how it's quite flattened off, whereas the rest of the fingers are conic. And on the left hand, we don't see that. I mean, it is a little bit flattened off, actually, but certainly more so on the right. So that, again, coincides with my theory that this person has now entered a job role that requires them to think in more sort of lateral, pragmatic ways of thinking. I mean, just look at the change here, where things really changed for this person. Their literal mental outlook on life had changed significantly after a certain point. And on the left hand, we see the same thing, but we see how it affects them internally. If you look closely, you can see an island here, and this is, you can see the headline dip downwards, and it's sort of, there's a bit of a bump in the road there, and then it kind of rises up again towards the end. So we see that actually this person's been through a very difficult period in their life, and they hit a low point. They felt very low. You can see, because the headline reaches, it starts to change direction, turn downwards towards darker thoughts, more depressive thoughts, and then afterwards we can see that the line clears up, the island disappears, and it becomes straighter. It rises slightly, and it becomes less interfered with. There's less interference there. It's a straighter, more focused, clearer path. So, as always, the left shows us internally, and this shows us this person's internal path, mentally speaking, whereas the right shows us something a bit more, how this person is functioning in the outside world, mentally speaking. So it's more work-related, home life-related, how they're functioning in a mental sort of capacity way, whereas on the left hand, it shows us more how they're dealing with it internally, psychologically. And the sixth point I wanted to make here, and I've kind of already covered it, is that the fact there's no overlap in the heartline on the right hand and what that means. I pretty much covered this already. So the fact that there's no overlap in the right hand, to me, means that, I mean, there is still an indication of some sort of physical interference here in the same place, but just in a different way, and it sort of appears as though it's mended on the right. So you could interpret as though this has been a success. Again, I could be completely wrong about my operation theory, and it could be that all of what we've seen on the left is in fact completely emotional and internal and has nothing to do. I mean, I would be surprised if this person doesn't have, at the very least, heart issues. I do think there has been some operation. And this person, I believe their health is a direct possibility to affect their happiness. They are very health conscious, yet we've got a very low hanging Pluto here, and this is someone who's very in touch with their inner workings of their body. And we can see that the success line, which is also known as the Apollo line or the Sun line, all the same thing. We see it reaching up from the heart line itself, from where this hinting at an overlap occurs. From this island, a sun line or success line that stems from the heart line represents, because the success in a person's life is not just their achievements and their finances, it's also the happiness, the peace, and the prosperity. Sometimes it represents a person's health. I don't see all that often, but the first wealth is health. And so it represents, in a lot of cases, happiness, peace. And when you don't see a headline that kind of hints towards thinking about money, I don't see too much in this person's palm that shows the importance of money, although this person certainly understands the value of money. We see that by the long second phalanges of the fingers. It does, to me, this indicates not only do we see support in this person's happiness from family and from those they love, it does indicate to me that this person's health is potentially directly influenced by their health. Their happiness is potentially under threat by their health. So I think they worry about that. And actually, on that note of worry, it's extremely important for this person not to worry. Anxiety is one of the biggest causes of heart issues, of cardiac arrests. And so for this person, their state of mind, their nervousness, anxiety levels, all of this adrenaline, cortisol in the body has a direct impact on their physical health. Their mental health has a direct knock-on effect to their physical, or could do. So it's extremely important for this person to not get worked up, to not have a stressful job, a job without deadlines, to not surround themselves by unnecessary stress, stressful people. In a dietary sense, it's extremely important for this person to avoid milk, because milk is used in industrial glues. Such is its sticky potential, stickiness. It's so sticky that it's used in industrial glues. I mean, it gums up the arteries, and it's one of the biggest causes, dietary causes, of cardiac issues in later life. Milk pre 35 is okay. I mean, really, it's healthy for children, but in adults, not so much. So the last point I wanted to make is the fate lines. There are 2 on the right hand and 1 on the left. Now, this is interesting because 2 fate lines on the right hand would suggest that there has been some intervention, physical intervention with this person's destiny. And again, that for me is another piece of the circumstantial puzzle, another clue that corroborates my theory. And the original fate line here, the primary kind of fate line, is this one that rises down. I mean, it's coming more or less from Neptune, somewhat from Pluto, from the center of the hand, more or less, rising up, and then it kind of stops at late 20s there, perhaps 30. And we see that on the left hand as well. But on the right hand, this newer fate line, it rises from Luna. It comes from a place of working with others, for others, a creative place. Luna is the place of imagination, a deep well of thoughts and dreams, unconscious ideas. And for me, it seems as though this person had a desire, perhaps they still do, to work in a creative field, because this headline is heading, it's on a creative path until this happens. And so you've got this creative endeavor here to work with an audience, almost, to have a role that involves the adoration of others' approvals. And again, just like the primary career line, I mean, the primary one kind of begins to fade out late 20s anyway, but it's fully impossible by the age of about 30. And this career, that's the one that's desired, again, it stops before it reaches the headline at the age of around 30, maybe 31. And it's linked to, if you look closely, it's linked to the Mercury line, which is the Beryl Hutchinson said this line, the Mercury line, was the unconscious headline. It's also known as the intuition line, if it kind of curves around like this. It's also known as the health line or the liver line. The Mercury line, it does display, it kind of has, for me, a narrative of someone's health, but on an unconscious level. It's their nervous system, and everyone's different in the way that they reveal how their health affects them on an unconscious level, in how they express that in their palms. I'm not really making any sense here, but a person who is the calm and silent type often doesn't have a Mercury line at all because they're completely unaware of their abilities to sense outside of their 5 senses. And so it doesn't show. So everyone expresses and shows their unconscious headline, if you like, differently. It's tied to the nervous system. It's part of it's physical, yet it's also mental. It's a very curious line, and it's very difficult to read. But for me, that it's really interesting that this secondary fate line is tied to the health line and stops abruptly. This is a very difficult thing for me to try to get to the bottom of. It could be that this person, their career in something creative was directly linked with their unconscious ability to sense. So they were tapping into something in order to fulfill a kind of creative role, a project of some sort. And at some point they had to stop doing that, as I say, about the age of 31, but it could be that they're still doing it. In any case, like I've said earlier on in the video, they're now thinking more pragmatically, more lateral thinking in a more kind of administrative way because of the role they're now in. But it's curious to me because the career lines after this point of early, 30-ish, 31 perhaps, they don't really seem to be existent. That doesn't mean this person doesn't have a career after this point. I don't think they're enjoying their job as much as they were, or perhaps they are not able to carry out the role they wanted to, and so they feel as though they're sort of drifting without purpose at the moment. Could be that. This is certainly the hand of a superb communicator, someone with an ability to be creative, innovative, reach into their imaginative depths of their mind while still maintaining an ability to think ahead practically. It's a very awesome blend of traits to have, because most people kind of fall more or less into one or the other categories. To be artistic, creative, but also to be a superb communicator at the same time as having these strong administrative abilities. This person is highly capable. But as a result of things that have happened to them, they are now they've lost a little bit of confidence. No, actually, other way around, sorry. I got my left and my rights confused. They've gained a bit of confidence now, and I wonder if this is because of the job role they've now found themselves in. I don't know. I'm not really making much sense here. I find that I discover something and then go back on myself. I wonder if this person is getting paid enough money for the work they're doing. This is a difficult read indeed. They're a bit of a born leader in any case, because they're just a multi-talented person that they are. They understand their bodies very well indeed. There isn't a great deal of advice I want to give to this person, because I think they would probably be pretty good at giving me advice. The only real thing I want to say about this person here is they have an abundance of ideas, and perhaps not quite as much conviction as they should have in order to carry out and see these ideas through. They might have the potential for leaving too many loose ends. So my only advice really is to not put too many irons in the fire and to see things through. Don't try and fix things that aren't broken. When something works, keep at it and don't stop doing it. If this is really the sort of person, if they had a few hundred years to live, they would achieve a great many things. So really my advice is, whatever it is that you're doing and you're doing well, keep doing it, because this kind of headline here shows really a sort of person who is very capable of becoming very well known for the work that they're doing. And with the Apollo and Jupiter fingers being so level as well, It really does. Again, these are at least two signs of success, two signs of fame in the palm. And you don't get to reach these levels without being intelligent, hardworking, forward-thinking, and creative. A varied mixture of awesome traits, as I've said. I found this particularly difficult, this reading. I'm not sure if I've gotten everything right, so it'll be interesting to find out if this person can let me know. So, thanks for watching, and let me know what your thoughts are on my analysis here. I'm always interested to know what other people think, and I'm not completely confident I've been all that accurate here. But there are reasons as to why I've said the things I have, and the only way I can learn is through my mistakes. It's nice to see comments where people said, "Yeah, you were great, really accurate," but it's not helpful for me. I need to know where I'm going wrong in order to become a better palmist. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.